All right, y'all. So very interesting conversation that I want to talk about. So these are some stories, a couple stories that I came across this morning that I want to have a conversation about. Now, the first story is Donald Trump reportedly. Now, this claim has since been refuted, which I also find to be very interesting. But reportedly, he plans to kick trans troops out of the military within days of the inauguration. Now, as I said, Trump's team has refuted these claims. They said they're speculation. They said that people who are making these claims have no idea what they're talking about and to not believe anything unless it comes directly from the Trump administration or from the mouth of Donald Trump himself. The second thing I want to get into is Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense nominee. He was on the Sean Ryan show. They talked about women in combat roles and what that could potentially look like under a Trump administration. And, you know, this clip has already went viral, so I'm pretty sure I'm not going to spoil it for too many people, but he flat out says that women should not be in combat roles. So I want to have that conversation as well. Now, the interesting part about this conversation when it comes to Trump wanting to kick out trans troops from the military, I have no idea what video was playing. Some elephants and some gorillas is playing right there. I don't know what that is. The interesting thing is, you know, the process of these individuals making it into the military in the first place. I'm very curious to know what that was. And I'm very curious to know if there was any lessening of the requirements that allowed these individuals to pass the physical exams, that allowed these individuals to pass the mental evaluations, and that allowed these individuals to ultimately be deemed fit to join the military. I'm very curious to know if there was a lessening of the requirements in order to make the military more inclusive, right? Which would ultimately compromise the military because we want to play these, you know, identity politics games. And I don't know if that was happening or not, but I'm just wondering if that played a role into it, because obviously then those people should not be in the military in the first place. Now, the thing that I want to talk about, and I want to watch a video, there's a report that I want to watch from First Post. So I'll play this video from First Post, but you know, something that I want to talk about, just something for you to think about as you're watching this video, is the fact that there's reportedly 15,000 transgender people serving in the military. So that's 15,000 people. So regardless of what you think, regardless of if you think that these individuals are fit to be in that position in the first place or not, that's 15,000 positions. That's 15,000, you know, individual functions and duties that would essentially be removed in an instant. Obviously, that's going to have an effect on the military. How big of an effect is that going to have? Who knows? I have no idea. I have no military experience. I don't know what that would look like. But just somebody thinking, you know, with common sense, you would think that if you removed those functions and duties overnight, it would have a massive effect because you're not going to be able to replace those overnight. Even if you were able to replace those positions overnight, there's still going to be some sort of skill gap because you have to train those people for those positions. On top of that, there's going to be a massive cost to recruit, which is ultimately going to flow to the taxpayers, right? Now, the flip side of this argument is the fact that, well, if these individuals are removed from the military, then the military, the government would save money because of the outrageous medical cost that are associated with having these people serve in the military. Now, as you could imagine, the military is potentially paying for people to, you know, chop off their you-know-what and turn it into a you-know-what. I'm not going to get too explicit, but you know what I'm talking about. So this is being funded by taxpayer dollars, and these are expensive, which require a lot of treatment, follow-up, hormones, all the type of stuff. And that's an extreme case, but I'm sure this is happening with the service members in the military. So obviously there would be a cost reduction from that standpoint, but how does that compare to the cost of recruiting and replacing these people? And ultimately, is this going to make the military more efficient or not? Because obviously in the short run, there's going to be a massive drop in efficiency. You would think, right? You would think. But ultimately, is this going to make it more efficient in the long run? I don't know. Let's get into this video and then we can continue our conversation.
Let's turn to the US now, where Donald Trump is shaking things up, or at least promising to. He's got a long list of things to do on his first day in office. Tonight, we have a new item on that list: transgender people. Trump wants to expel them from the US Army, and this has triggered a whole new debate. Reports say that Donald Trump will sign an executive order on day one in office. He will ask the Pentagon, which is their defense ministry, to fire all trans workers. And how many is that? Around 15,000. He wants to fire 15,000 trans workers from the US military. Frankly, it's on brand for Trump. In his first term in office, he banned transgenders from joining the US Army. Later, Joe Biden reversed that ban. And now that Trump is coming back to office, he promises to go one step ahead. He wants to fire.
See, this is why I find it interesting that his team, specifically, I think her name is Carolyn Leavitt or Levitt. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but spokeswoman for the Trump administration. That's why I was so interested as to the reason why she's like so quickly refuted these claims, because this wouldn't necessarily surprise me because he has already spoken about this in his first term about banning trans people from joining the army. So this claim wouldn't necessarily surprise me. So I'm just curious to know why they got out in front of it so quickly and said that this was false.
Trans people in the armed forces. Now, this raises two questions. One, why is Trump doing it? What is his reasoning? And two, should trans people be allowed to serve at all? Let's take the first one first. Trump has given no reason this time, no reason why he wants to fire them. But in the past, he has blamed medical costs and disruptions. Although it's evident that this is not about cost, it's about politics. Trump opposes the idea of expanding trans rights, and he has turned it into a culture war. On one side are woke, pro-trans Democrats. On the other side is a realistic and conservative Donald Trump. That is how he has framed the issue. Which brings us to the second question. Is this the right call? Should trans people be allowed to serve in the military at all? Again, there are two factors to consider. Number one is the strategic impact. Will trans recruits affect the efficiency of the military? And number two is the social impact. Will this affect harmony in the ranks? Will it divert attention from other urgent issues? Let's look at both these factors. In 2017, when Donald Trump banned the entry of trans people into the army, there was a lot of scrutiny and debate. His top general...
Well, just to stop that for a second, I could imagine that this already affects the dynamic within the military. It has to an extent. It has to, because not everybody agrees with this. Not everybody is on board with it, right? Like, so it has to affect it from some standpoint. Now, is that effect ultimately leading to a reduction in efficiency and production and output to make us the most, efficient that we can be to protect what we need to protect? Quite possibly, right? And then on the other side of it, removing these individuals is obviously going to cause the people who support it within the military to feel some type of way. And you might even see, this is something I just thought of, you might even see people who are in the military who support transgender, people working alongside of them. You might even see those individuals step down to a certain extent. Potentially. You never know.
Opposed the ban. He said joining the ranks cannot be about identity, it's about standards. If you meet those standards, you're fit to serve, irrespective of your gender. Listen to what he said.
In my view, we're a standards-based military, as you point out, and we're concerned about the deployability and the effectiveness of any of the service members. And so if you meet the medical, the behavioral health, the conduct standards and the physical standards, et cetera, then it's my view that you should be welcomed in. And I don't believe there's anything inherent in anyone's identity to prevent them from serving in the military. It's about standards, not an identity.
So it's about standards, not an identity. The question I'm going to raise again is, were those standards adjusted or modified in any way, shape, or form in order to accommodate the increase to allow these individuals into the military? That is information that I do not know, but that is very valuable information to know going into this conversation, because if it's yes, then obviously they shouldn't be in the military in the first place, right? Now, if you're saying no, the standards were never changed, and that these individuals, according to the unchanged standards, they met all of these standards and they have been deemed fit, then okay. I mean, I can't say I necessarily agree, but it is what it is. But I could imagine that there are some standards that were lessened. I could imagine. I don't know, but I could imagine.
It's not about identity, it's about standards, is what he said, and he wasn't alone in saying this. 56 retired admirals and generals opposed that ban. They asked Donald Trump to reverse it. So these generals say that having trans people in the army does not compromise it strategically. Then we come to the medical side of it. In 2015, the American Medical Association joined this debate. They said trans people should not be banned from the army. They said it was based on bad science. That's the medical view. Now,
yeah, but the medical view is kind of skewed because we don't even have enough data and information to even know the long-term effects of what this is doing to people. And obviously it's not going to be good because you're literally trying to reverse the natural hormonic pattern. I don't even know if that's a word, but you're trying to reverse the natural hormones and patterns of a man or of a woman by introducing artificial forms of testosterone or estrogen or whatever it is that they use in order to suppress or increase unnaturally. This is obviously going to cause problems in the body because your body was not supposed to produce those hormones at that level or capacity in the first place, but you're trying to induce it. So I think it's pretty clear that this is going to have long-term effects negatively on you. And then you also get into the psychological, in the mental effects. We do know that this group of people, they, commit, at a larger rate than any other, group. So obviously there's some concerns there that I think we're not fully taking into consideration.
let's talk about the next factor, which is the social impact. Transgenders are a vulnerable community.
Hold on. Let me skip this part because there was a crazy thing. Hold on one second. There was one thing that she said that I want to show you because I thought it was very interesting. She was talking about how many militaries actually allow this, and it's actually very few.
Trans people. That's 19 out of more than.
Hold on. Look, listen to this.
All of this, we must admit some realities. Only 19 militaries in the world recruit trans people. That's 19 out of more than 200. And
only 19 militaries in the world recruit trans people. That's 19 out of more than, she said 200? Only 19. So also you got to think about it from a perception standpoint, because perception, it could have a lot of effects on reality. When you have a military that is perceived to be weak because of we are one of the 19, then what does that do for the morale of people and militaries, nations that want to attack? It would most likely increase their morale because they're perceiving us to be weak and compromised, right? I'm just talking from a perceptive level. I don't necessarily think that we're viewed as being the most, and I think we are the most powerful military on the planet. I don't think it's even close, but I don't know if that is necessarily the perception that the world has at this moment in time.
India is not one of them. Trans and gay people are not allowed to serve in the Indian military, but officials are discussing some changes. Last year, they started looking at employment opportunities for trans people. This may not be in combat or officer roles, though. Either way, the fact is that this remains a niche debate. It is limited to progressive democracies with rule of law. The rest of the world does not care. Plus, this is a big change for a rigid institution. Most militaries have decades of traditions and beliefs. Right or wrong, they exist.
Okay. Let's move on to the next story because it does go hand in hand with what we're talking about. So Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense nominee, was on the Sean Ryan show. They get into this discussion about women in combat. I want to get into it just briefly. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I'm gonna give you enough so that we can have a conversation.
Admission standards, overall standards. I think a huge one is women in combat and quotas. I think the way they pushed that under Obama in a way that had zero to do with efficacy, zero to do with lethality and capability.
You don't like women in combat?
No.
Why not?
I love women service members who contribute amazingly because everything about men and women serving together makes the situation more complicated, and complication in combat means casualties are worse. And when you actually go into the hood, again, and I got response. I've got 99% positive response to this. A little bit of pushback. But when you actually break down what they did in the studies to open the door for women in combat, I mean, they just ignored them. So the Marine Corps was the only service that actually tried to fight back and say, and now obviously I'm exempting special operations, which thus far has held the line fairly well. Because if they were lowering the standard to become a Navy SEAL, just to let women inside the Navy SEALs, that's going to change the capabilities and ethos of the Navy SEALs, except for
This is what I was talking about earlier in terms of standards and like lowering standards just to hit a quota, a social quota. This is what I was talking about. So I could imagine that was taking place. I could imagine, right? But it is interesting. Like you look at the Navy SEALs, you look at the Rangers, you look at these elite combat, organizations. I don't think there's been a single woman that has made it through, which, makes sense because if you're just speaking from a truth perspective, men are more dangerous than women. They can cause more damage. They can take more damage. They're more lethal. More testosterone, more drive. They're more physical. Like, of course, men in combat positions is going to make for a safer military as opposed to women in those same positions, because when you put men and women side by side, one is more lethal, more physical, stronger, bigger, faster. The other isn't. And that's okay, but we got to be really honest with ourselves in terms of the position and the role of women in combat and what that looks like. And once again, you're talking to somebody who has no military experience. So just my opinion.
Very small example of some, female super soldier who's capable of doing it. But because of how Washington works, they're going to change the standards. They're going to push for quotas. We have numerous quotes in the book of, these standards aren't changing. They're just evolving. Okay, they're just evolving to meet the needs of today.
They're not getting tougher.
They're not getting tougher. No. So they're getting lower average. Take someone like Milley. I mean, he was calling down to individual units to make sure they had female company commanders after they graduated from Ranger School. Like, what's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs doing pushing company command slots for? It's all an agenda. It's all to say, oh, we have this first, or we have this, that.
Who's Milley? Was that the dude that was on this video right here? Hold on. This wasn't Milley, was it? Hold on one second. That was Milley. Ah. So this is the dude who was talking about, they met the standards. So Mark Milley. So this is the dude that was talking about, hey, they met the standards. We don't look at identity. We look at the standards, and they met the standards. They can do the job. That's Milley. And then what did he just say about Milley? Hold on. Let me rewind that real quick. 55-16. Let's go 54-34.
And ethos of the Navy SEALs, except for a very small example of some, female super soldier who's capable of doing it. But because of how Washington works, they're going to change the standards. They're going to push for quotas. We have numerous quotes in the book of, these standards aren't changing. They're just evolving. Okay, they're just evolving to meet the needs of today.
They're not getting tougher.
They're not getting tougher. No. So they're getting lower average. Take someone like Milley. I mean, he was calling down to individual units to make sure they had female company commanders after they graduated from Ranger School. Like, what's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs doing pushing company command slots for? It's all an agenda. It's all to say, oh, we have this first, or we have this, that. So that's proliferated everywhere. The reason women started getting in combat is because of forward support companies.
Okay. I think that does a lot to support the argument. And to support the reason why Trump would want to have these individuals removed in the first place. Now knowing that information. So there was most likely standards that were lowered in order to put these people in that position when they shouldn't have been in that position in the first place. Now you've kind of further screwed us. And the reason why I say they've kind of further screwed us is because of the cost associated, is because you have these people in these positions, in these functions, in these roles, and you can't say that all 15,000 of them plus are completely useless. I'm not going to buy that argument that they're all completely useless. So you have a percentage, whatever that percentage of them, that are in the military that are serving in roles, in functions that are needed. So now we have to replace those and spend more money to replace it, spend more money to train them. Yeah. Yeah. This is very interesting stuff. What do y'all think? Drop a comment, drop a like, subscribe. I'm out, y'all.